if you think beyond the commentary and come to your own conclusions with the information, perhaps the title and the side of mythology that the author takes becomes quite ridiculous to you. Perhaps we can say that the guy is a prophet in the sense that the false prophets of the Baptist and charismatic Christian types are. But the guy never claims to be a prophet. He is a radical in that he points out that all the wars since World War II had both American and Israeli involvement. That he doesn't make things about wars between religions. That he doesn't make things even about between particular nations. He makes it about what he should be doing, what other people should be doing on a moral level, on what people should be hoping for, that all nations share similar rights, that if there is war, it's to end oppression and aggression. I think that this book should have actually listed out the 93 end time signs of the Hojatiyah. If there's general and specific stuff to look at, well, what are they? This book should have been clearer if it's trying to make the point that he's their chief theologian, or was. One reason for that not being the case is that the author may not have wanted to look into either fundamentalist or conservative Islamic sources for themselves, but to see them through the lens of Zionist media. Because when they talk about, ending the state of Israel, they're not talking about going after Jews, they're talking about removing the Zionist entity. The Zionist entity that, for example, allowed the USS Liberty to be attacked, and the Mossad involvement in what happened in 2001, and Netanyahu's push to label terrorism as an Islamic problem rather than the case that none of these war crimes were ever not condemned by the Islamic sources. He obscures the fact that the Shia and the Sunni believe in the return of Jesus, but Jesus as a Messiah. So they skip over that and say, well, they have a guided one before that. It's like, well, but he leaves out the before that part. A key difference is a voice heard is Michael, according to the Christian version, and the Islamic version, it's Gabriel. But I don't know about that. Isn't it Israfil that blows the final trump? Isn't that what's explicitly stated? So he's not really listing out his sources with that difference. Islam does teach that the end times and all that is a specific time, but it doesn't teach a fatalism sort of thing. So we are responsible for our decisions towards stuff. Certain stuff is going to happen, but you don't have to be part of it. The hastening of the coming is because the community isn't ready for it. There has to be the spiritual community that is going to follow these end-time reformers. It's not just going to happen because things are bad, because certainly things are bad all over, right? I mean, is there an actual Islamic country? I mean, really, as a government? There are some that get closer. Iran's actually one of those that get closer. And Iran, you know, they wanted to end the oppression of the Shah. Sure, it was great for Western companies. See, that's what's been criticized. Zionism and the actions of Western companies. You know, all these death to chants, if you find out what the context of them is, it's not anti any nation or anti any religion. It's about the oppressive rulers are the people who are their agents as politicians and celebrities that the issue is with. And we can't say that the Mahdi idea is, you know, on the same page as the Christian Antichrist, because the Mahdi doesn't take the side of the people that the Bible calls the oppressors that are going to be overrun by the people of Gaza and the West Bank and the Russians and the Iranians, you know, to the extent of them no longer existing as a state. But they're you know, they are opposed by those people because they have come and invaded. They're not the rightful people of the land via the language and tonic. And as Zechariah 14 shows that, and some other portions I've talked about more elsewhere about the biblical idea. And the biblical idea is that, you know, the current state that's been occupying since 1948 and the movement before that was doing terrorism and stuff like this, that was coalesced into current government branches underneath that state, you know, is because they filled the wells and they became known as the great oppressors of the land. It's not because of, you know, oh, this is a one religion place. You know, that's not the goal of Iran. And as far as the nuclear thing, they've been starting in 2007. They were able to produce a couple nuclear weapons all on their own every single year. And the ability has been growing and growing ever since. It's thought that they can do that every week or something now. A difference with comparison with the Bible. There's not the forced conversion to Islam. And the Mahdi is, you know, the Antichrist in the Bible, you know, is befriended by the Jews and all that stuff. So, in the Islamic belief, it's only 70,000 of the rich Jews of Isfahan will betray their people and go and follow that figure. It's you know, a very different sort of mythological take. So what are some ideas that he actually takes on? Miracles are strange signs, will appear in a way that will help reform society. There will be a rise of real democracy rather than, you know, this fake democracy that is pushed by corporate interests of so-called liberals. Material progress will need to be matched with tranquility, with development of the mind and spirit, or at least the return to its real nature. The wonders of the material world and their benefits to humanity will become better known, and the deceit will be lifted, even by force. Humanity's needs are not met by the secular order. There will be a revival rather than a regression. People need to purify themselves. They need to become trained and all that in order for the establishment of a one world government that's a theocracy. And by theocracy, we don't mean, you know, the Constitution is Quran and Sunnah, as it's called, are, you know, what's revealed and what's inspired, because you can't just vote rights away or force society to pay. Well, I mean, you can, but, you shouldn't force society to pay for what would be oppression. There's the belief that 313 will lead the charge as followers, that there'll be a flourishing of certain environmental features. The environment will recover. The Arabian and other monarchies of the Muslim majority world will come to an end. As I said with Zechariah 14, there will be an end of the role of the Jews with an Arabian way. And of course, that Arabian way we know isn't the same thing as putting the Arabs first, but just that that's the area and language that the international message came from. When the great oppressors are fought, then the liberation will come to and from the West. Any taxes and such will go towards benefiting the people rather than corporate agendas and the taking away the rights of nations to science, development, and progress on an actual scale. It won't be limited to some nations. These wars on civilian targets will come to an end. The Islamic way, of course, is that armies fight armies. So military and government basically is the only thing that a Muslim will allow themselves to fight in war, unless they let hypocrisy and westernization slip into their hearts. The push by figures like Netanyahu towards attacking any country with ability that it may do something someday, that will not be accepted. The purposes of wars is not to drive out populations, as we have seen with millions of people in the Holy Land. That's not a rightful purpose of war. The purpose isn't to destroy reputations or to come up with insults for the other side. War shouldn't be about extending borders merely. It shouldn't be about capturing resources. Certainly, wars of conversion of ideology or mythology should no longer be considered acceptable. What happens to one group doesn't excuse them to do wrong to another group. Exaggerating narratives to justify isn't right either. When we look at other nations and how supposedly they don't work right and stuff, there's sanctions. There's policies keeping the country down. Dozens of countries are not allowed the majority of the resources. This is why some things happen. And we can look at this beyond what just spiritual people are going to see. The reasons from the Bible and the Quran, the Hadith, extra biblical stuff, the ancient Zoroastrian stuff perhaps. There's plenty of reasons not to just, we need to kill off all our neighbors because they might fight us someday. It's like, if they're not fighting you, leave them alone. Why should everybody have to pay for the splendor of national parades and all that? We can be fervent in our relationship to the matters. There's certainly countries or religions or tribes or whatever that are supreme, either in their choices or otherwise. But when a country is truly for itself, for its majority religion, it becomes for the minorities. It becomes for the world. It becomes a resistance to the liberal and the conservative orders. it becomes even a terror to those who would want to aggress against it. But on the other hand, like the word blessing in the Bible, it's a blessing to those who choose to let it be a blessing.